Welcome everyone to today's masterclass, the AI Workforce Playbook for GTM teams. In today's masterclass, you're going to learn how to use Claude to automate account research, prioritize target accounts, generate personalized outreach at scale, and create AI-powered workflows that expand your team's execution capacity. So today we're going to have about a 35-minute presentation by Michael Yee, and he is going to teach us more about this. After the presentation, we will have a Q&A session. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to put them in the chat or private message them to me, and we will answer those during that Q&A portion of the meeting. I just want to remind everyone that this meeting is specifically just for masterclass, so please no promotion in the chat or anything like that. We would like to keep it focused on the masterclass. So with that, I will turn the time over to Michael Yee, technical co-founder at Tiga AI. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Skylar. Well, welcome back, everybody. This is the second session in our Claude Masterclass series. Last time we were covering agents, skills, MCPs. Today we're going to go a little bit deeper into the topic of AI in GTM, and we're going to explore concepts of the AI workforce. Just in case you forgot about me or this is your first time coming to the masterclass, my name is Michael Yee. I'm a technical co-founder of Tiga AI, where we build AI GTM platform designed for B2B revenue teams. I've had a lot of experience both working with and developing agents. If you want to chat about AI, please connect with me on LinkedIn. Love to get into it. Love to just chat and bounce ideas off the wall together. So before we get started, I just want to kind of say, before we dive in, there's a lot of hype around the terms AI workforce, agentic, and my goal here today is to cut through that and not use buzzwords just for the sake of using buzzwords. I really want to leave you with practical concepts that you can actually use. And as AI becomes more and more prevalent in our teams, in our workforce, in our organizations, there are going to be different tools that come and go. There's probably going to be different ways of implementing it that come and go. But I think these concepts are things that are going to stick for a while. And there are new terms that are kind of coming out that, and new concepts that are coming out related to AI that I think are really useful as you move forward in the next few years. All right, here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to do a quick recap of the last session. So we're just going to review what are agents, how do you kind of define them, what are the core concepts. Then we're going to jump into agent workforce concepts, things that make them unique and the kind of the separation of different terms of what they are. We're going to talk about agent workforce motions. So things that they can do. We're going to talk about execution loops and learning loops. And then we're going to go into a couple of examples. So I'm going to talk about a Claude Cowork example and a Tiga example. All right, let's start with kind of just like a really quick recap of the last session, just so that we kind of have basic terms kind of understood and that, everything for the most part is kind of going to make sense. So probably the most important and simplest thing that we're going to go over that we covered last time is the difference between, agents and chatbots and really thinking about them differently. So chatbots, they respond to questions, but they don't really have a persisted memory of you or context between sessions. They wait for you to ask something, then they give a response, and then that kind of context stops. There's no follow-up, there's no persistence. Agents, though, you can think of them more like autonomous workers. They take action on their own. They don't wait for you to, give them direction in between every single step. They have access to some degree of tools. They can search the web, run code, call APIs. They maintain their context between sessions. And the real big shift that is different is we're moving away from just ask, get an answer interactions, and it's more a pattern of assign and execute some task. And I think that's the real shift that's fundamental. between just a simple LLM by itself and an agent. So the things that make this really powerful that you kind of need to know about as we move forward are skills and MCPs. So skills, they're just the instructions and workflows you create for your agent. You can think of them as the playbook. So telling an agent what steps to take and how to execute them. You can reuse them across different agents and different agent implementations. And then you have things like MCPs. So these are just the bridges that actually connect your agent to tools and other systems. So it would be something like connecting your Claude to platforms like HubSpot, Slack, Tiga, or whatever you use. They give agents real things to actually act on, the actual data and systems you need to get your agent to accomplish something. So the key distinction here is skills are how you do something. MCPs are what you do it with. And really important thing, just to reiterate, that I think is really valuable and a really key message for anybody who's thinking about bringing agents into their workforce, into their teams, is that anybody can write a skill. You don't have to be a developer. Uh, Skills are just plain text kind of instructions. There's nothing complex about them. They're just markdown files. You don't have to have any coding capability. You don't need to be a programmer or have any unique technical expertise. If you can communicate a process to a coworker in an email, you can write a skill. And then in the last session, we used some skills that we built and some tools, and we built a LinkedIn content agent that would help write LinkedIn posts based on your interests and form of communication. So we combine those two things. And if you want to see how we did it, you can check out the last masterclass and reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to send the guide to you. And you can kind of get like a little cheat sheet of how to just spin one up really quickly. That's simple. All right. With that recap over, we got the core concepts kind of established. I'm going to move forward into some AI or agent workforce concepts. And there are a few things that need to be separated to kind of help you understand the different pieces that go together to make an agent workforce possible. All right. So first you have an LLM, and this is just what handles reasoning and instructions and decision making. And then you have this other piece that maybe you haven't heard of, which is, kind of in the developer world called the agent harness. So this is like the connective tissue that bridges the LLM to the real world, letting it use tools like APIs, search, database, going on the web, taking action in your systems. And then you have this other piece, which is the agent management platform, and that's the orchestrator. So it coordinates multiple agents, tracks performance, adjusts goals, and manages complex workflows at scale. The LLM, you know, most of you all know these concepts, but I'm just going to cover it really quickly. You can just kind of think of the LLM as a brain, um, as that component. It's thinking, it's reasoning. But one thing that's really worth noting is that under the hood, it's just generating tokens one at a time. So it's just spitting out tokens, um, and it's not actually doing any of the action on its own. And the big players in this world are like Anthropic, OpenAI, DeepSeek. They're the people that are providing the actual LLM compute. All right. The next piece that I think is really important to understand when thinking about your agent or AI workforce is the agent harness. So this is the software that is the scaffolding around just a language model by itself. It turns it into something that it can actually do things in the real world rather than just produce text. So this is how the relationship kind of works. Roughly, the LLM is a reasoning engine. It generates tokens. That's it. There's no memory between calls, no ability to act, no awareness of anything outside of the tokens that it's either has in its context or that it's generating. The harness does everything else. It's the code and the software that does everything else around the language model. So it manages state and context. It decides what the language model gets access to, kind of like the conversation history, summarizing it, um, tools, system instructions. It defines and exposes functionality and tools to the language model. So it gives it a menu of functionality to call tools. So these could be things like getting contacts from your CRM or enriching leads in the CRM or segmenting accounts. It needs those tools exposed to the language model for it to be able to even invoke those tools. The agent harness also parses the model's output, figures out what are tool calls versus what is just reasoning or text, and it executes these tool calls for the language model. So the agent harness is the piece that's actually calling the tools. And then from the resulting tools, it feeds it back into the language model and reinserts it into the context. All right. The other piece that is really important is what I'd call the agent management platform. And this is the control plane that runs and governs a fleet of agents, distinct from the harness, which is the loop logic for a single agent's thinking, acting, observing cycle. A harness lives on one process, and most of the time, it's your laptop. So Claude Desktop, Claude Code, that is an agent harness that is living on your machine. But an agent management platform kind of runs agents in shared, persisted environments where you have deployed infrastructure where agents can reach out into other systems. They're available either on schedule or they're always up. And the core responsibilities of an agent management platform are to create and maintain agents, versioning agents, definitions, so the prompts, tools, models, deploying agents, rolling them back, health checking them, getting rid of old ones that have gone stale. The other thing that their core responsibility is allocating compute and LLM resources. So, spinning up cloud computing resources for agents. And then one of the probably most important things about an agent management platform is establishing permission structures. So scoping what each agent can touch, what tools, data, and systems it has access to, managing the credentials, identity, um, gating or preventing risky actions from just being automatically approved, and isolating agents to their appropriate scope. So you wouldn't want them reaching into systems that they shouldn't have access to. So, like if you had an agent, for example, that generated LinkedIn posts, you would not want that agent to also have access to writing or updating or reassigning people in your CRM. Not because you wouldn't want any agent to have that capability, but that agent in particular has a different directive. Its directive is to generate content. You wouldn't want to allow it to have access to tools that are beyond its goal or directive. Within a traditional org, you wouldn't want engineers being able to manipulate marketers' emails as they're going out. The same concept kind of still applies for agents. You don't want them to be able to exceed the scope of what they are supposed to be working within. And the last thing for an agent management platform that's just kind of like the backstop is putting in spending limits for agents. Every few weeks there's some story about there's some big organization that just lets people spin up agents and they can kind of run out of control and they can spend tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars spinning and churning on certain processes using the most expensive language models and accessing pretty expensive data. So putting in spending limits where you say, hey, this agent, you have a limit of spending just a certain amount of actual real world dollars, and you can't exceed that within a certain time frame. Just to summarize these concepts, the LLM thinks, the language model does the reasoning, analysis, and decision making. The harness acts, so it has the mechanisms to execute, and it's the scaffolding around the language model that gives it capability. And the management layer keeps things in check. It's the oversight, the governance, ensuring that everything stays aligned with our goals and values. It's kind of like the HR for your agents. All right. So now I'm going to talk about how you can actually, implement agents in practice for your GTM teams, and kind of talk about how different ways of thinking about it. And where I kind of start is with this kind of core issue that I see where everyone is using AI, but not everyone seems to be seeing the productivity payoff you'd expect to see or want to see at an org level. So there's this huge adoption versus productivity gap. Teams have embraced these tools like ChatGPT, Copilot, but that adoption doesn't always equal measurable, business outcomes or results. So I'm trying to distinguish between, hey, I use AI to just get stuff done, versus it's actually making us more productive. For some orgs, they really encourage teams to use AI, and they just say, hey, you have to hit a certain quota of using tokens or using AI. And they might not be using it for things that are actually driving productivity. And even when they are, sometimes it's just one single individual, where they're using it for point solutions. So they'll use ChatGPT for drafting an email or thinking through a problem, but it might just stay to that one person and that one specific task. And it's not something that's repeated or having impact at their either individual team or for the org at large. So the real challenge is, how do you move from individual convenience to a system where the org is getting some value? And that's where I think most teams, most orgs get stuck, is the gap between, hey, this tool helps me, versus we're getting real measurable results and we're getting something super useful. So I think the way that you bridge this gap is stop thinking in one-off tasks and start thinking in loops. Repeatable activities that run either on a trigger or an event or a schedule. And I think that there's two kind of archetypes of loops that you need to know about. And they are execution loops and learning loops. So first, execution loops. So these are agents that take over a manual, repeatable work that you're already doing. This could be something like lead routing, enrichment, personalization, content creation. They could be triggered by an event or just run automatically on a schedule. The key thing to understand in execution loops is that they should be running a play that always needs to be run, or you'd always like to have run, and you understand and can communicate the concept simply to an agent. Um, you know, One really small example that I think could be really useful is follow up for a no-show on a meeting. So this would be maybe a classic example of how an execution loop could help automate a highly repetitive task. Yet it's really, really important and crucial. So you could have it triggered off of a missed demo from the CRM, and then it just automatically executes a motion where it could either research this person to maybe get some data on them, and then write some personalized emails for them, and then add them to a sequence driving towards following up for re-engaging them and rescheduling a meeting. This is a very, very simple loop, but it's basically, we trigger off of a missed demo, but we know that they're super warm because they actually signed up for a demo. Now, let's get some, data about them, build some personalized emails to re-engage them, and then send these emails out automatically. That's a really small loop that you can do that is fairly powerful and a really good example of an execution loop. So the other type of loop is what I'd call a learning loop. And this is very different. This is an observational overseer. So it's continually watching your systems and processes, not acting on them. It identifies patterns and surfaces high-level insights from what it sees. But the key distinction from execution loop is its job is to give you feedback and recommendations. It's not taking direct action. Uh, the decision stays with the human operator. So, an example of this would maybe be like something that monitors the health of your pipeline. So it's not doing any of the work itself. It's constantly observing and analyzing data points that matter to your sales pipeline. This could be engagement, deal velocity, and response rates. Instead of a rep trying to manually spot why a deal might be stalling, um, you could have an agent and a learning loop identify these subtle patterns and anomalies across the entire pipeline and tell you either which segments or campaigns are getting stuck, or if there's a particular messaging angle that is losing traction. The output isn't going to be emailing the prospect themselves. The output from this type of agent, this learning loop, would probably be a report or a summary to either the sales manager or the rep themselves and highlighting what's performing well, what's at risk, and where human attention is needed most. So it provides intelligence, surfacing insights for the human operator. Um, Another thing could maybe be analyzing different segment performance, understanding what type of accounts are doing well, looking for patterns between account segments, prospects, um, and understanding what are the common threads between, um, our success in pipeline. Maybe it's not actually account segment, maybe it's a profile of an executive or an event. But that would be another type of learning loop. And once again, it's not going to be responsible for going into systems, changing things. It would be surfacing things to the human executive that's in charge of making these decisions. Um, and then I think something that's really powerful and a great scenario that you want to drive towards is having both an execution loop and a learning loop working together, working together in harmony. So, you could have an example where you have one execution loop that builds outbound campaigns, building sequences, and a learning loop that's watching and monitoring the performance of that outbound campaign. And it would be surfacing, hey, this messaging is working really great, but people fall off in the next email, targeting people differently, um, maybe trying to figure out ways of improving the performance of that sequence. So the execution loop acts, the learning loop maybe would advise either the human or it would maybe even communicate cross straight to the other agent. But together, they keep working on improving a certain motion. All right. I'm going to jump into some examples a little bit more and see if I can kind of show you an example with Claude and how you could kind of build one of these things simply. But I think I'd start, I'm just going to pause here and maybe drop in a poll. So I think I have a poll here, which is like, what workflow loops would you most likely want to automate? This could be content creation, what do you create? Personalizing outreach, fixing the CRM, uh, researching accounts and competitors, or just something else entirely. All
I'll leave
right.
this up for a minute or so, and then I'll share the results um,
Yeah.
with you so you can see.
Yeah. So while that's going, I'm going to start to walk through this example that I was able to build in Claude. And, um, even though, I've built this example, how you'd implement something like this for you and your team is probably going to be slightly different. Um, working with agents is similar to working with coworkers in that you kind of have to kind of train them a little bit, kind of work back and forth with them. And then eventually, you get to a place where they're kind of stable in doing a certain task. And that's the same process that I go through where you're going back and forth with Claude for a little bit. And then eventually you get to a place where it's a little bit more stable. So I'm going to show you an example of an execution loop that I built with Claude, and I built a skill in combined with some different tools in how it works. And I'm just going to kind of walk you through this. So here's the loop that I wanted to do. I wanted to revive close lost accounts and use some signal data combined with it. So I start with getting the list of closed lost accounts from my CRM. And then what I do is I take that list of closed lost, then I run a signal against them using Tiga where I say, have any of these accounts recently received a round of funding? Because if they have, they're much more likely to have budget and potentially renewed interest. And it's also a reason to kind of just reach out and congratulate them. And for each qualified account that does meet this, criteria, we re-engage them with a personalized email tailored to them. So we take each individual person, we research them, and then we write a personalized email to them. So this saves the team a lot of time, and it's a little motion that gives you a pretty good chance of reviving a deal or an account. So let me jump into this, and I'm gonna switch to sharing my Claude. All right. Okay. Also from the poll, personalized outreach at scale. Well, this is going to be a pretty close example to that. But the poll is like pretty pretty divided. There's definitely a lot of varied interest in what people want to do. Content creation, outreach. Nice. All right. Let me show you this example here. I'm not going to run it all the way through because also similar to human coworkers, agents do take time, particularly with GTM motions in ways that they don't with code because they're operating against lists. And so to do something like, find people, enrich them, write an email, add them to certain things, it can take a lot more time to run GTM motions with agents than things that agents are like heavily used for now, like code primarily. But let me show you just the prompt that I used, which is fairly simple. And I just start by just writing like a bulleted list. Hey, find all closed lost accounts. For those accounts, run the Tiga GTM signal to find out if they've recently received funding. For accounts with recent funding, find people associated with those accounts. Write personalized emails for each person. And then it worked for, a few minutes, cranking it out. I can go into the output that it had in a second. But the real thing that makes this kind of work and what makes it powerful is the skill that I built to actually get this to work. And this skill, the archetype and kind of the pattern of how you build this skill, anybody can do, but it will probably be different for your team and your org just slightly. And that slight difference in tailoring a skill for your team is really where the power comes from you, the user, is understanding how to describe what it is you want them to do and the nuance of how it works in your particular org. So this skill, I just called the close lost re-engage. And if you go to skills, I'll just show you, this is what it is. It's fairly simple, but it's, like I said, anybody can write skills. It's just a big text blob. But it says, all right, you help automate my GTM motions. This motion you run for a list of closed lost accounts for each of them. Use the Tiga GTM skill, find accounts that have recent funding. And then it talks about finding the people, generate a CSV of people with personalized emails for each of them. Then down here, I have much more detailed breakdown of what to do exactly. Um, I'm using Tiga to find out when their accounts have recent funding. Now, for you, you might be using Tiga, you might be using some other data platform, but you might want to add the detail of like, okay, this is the actual piece of data I'm looking for. And, you know, uh, if it's a certain configuration or whatever, you can just kind of throw the ID of either the signal or the custom column that you're looking for. And then you just say, hey, run it. And then for each of them, find people associated with it. So I give it some documentation on how to find people. And then I just tell it, hey, create a CSV with personalized emails for each of them. And then I just throw in kind of an example email uh, that I want of congratulating them on recent funding. And that's all it is. So if I go back to what it does, it just churns for like 5 or 10 minutes. It actually takes a little bit of time. And then it gets to a point where it finds all of the accounts um, with recent funding. So it finds the list of accounts with recent funding. And then it gives me example emails right here in the chat, with these personalized emails for each of them. And of course, for your team, uh, you're going to tailor this for how you want the output to be, or maybe for you, in particular, you want to have a certain tone of voice. You can also add that to the skill to really increase how it feels for you. And then it also output a CSV for all of the people. Um, so over here, it has a CSV with a breakdown for every single person, every account, and then an HTML email showing all the personalized emails for every single person. So let me jump back to my slides here. All right. Okay. Um, all right. So even what I showed you, there are still some limitations, and I just want to be kind of transparent about that. So, you can take this kind of motion with your Claude, but you still have some limitations, which is like things like hardware dependency. So, if you're running on Claude Desktop or even Claude Code, it runs when your laptop is open and running. So if it is a long process, like let's say you want to enrich, a list of people and you've got 1,000 people, as it goes through enriching those people, it's going to take a considerable amount of time. And if it's running on your laptop, if you close your laptop or you shut it off or, just normal life happens, it's going to stop running. The other thing is that in the example that I just showed you, um, Claude by itself doesn't have the ability to just send emails. So you still need, like it output a CSV of emails and personalization, which is really powerful and really valuable, depending upon who you are. But it doesn't fully close the loop that we were talking about where you would probably want it to send emails on its own. So you'd either have to add a plugin or tool into your Claude desktop to give it the capability to send the emails. Um, and then finally, it isn't the most natively accessible for your sales team or for your go-to-market team. Um, you want to be able to reach it maybe via text or via Slack or Teams. You want to be able to communicate with it similar to that, a similar way that you would with your current human team. And those are some of the things that I work on trying to tackle. And you always, those are things that we're trying to tackle with Tiga and the Tiga platform. We want to focus on having always on reliability where we're moving beyond just local hardware dependency. You have agents running in the cloud. They have integrated communication, just omnipresence via Slack, Teams, text message, wherever your, revenue team lives. You want it to have native GTM tooling. So out of the box, it can communicate with your, you know, CRM, your sales engagement platform, your enrichment platform. You really want it to be able to connect to your own LinkedIn, and you really want to have a controlled environment. And as you're thinking about applying agents to your team, this is something that obviously we're not all going to have day one, but it's going to be the direction that we all should be moving towards. And one of the things that's really important is just a controlled environment. You want to manage them kind of like you would a human. You don't want any unpredictable spend. You don't want them accessing tools that they shouldn't be able to. Um, so let me jump into the next example that hopefully will show this a little bit more. Um, and before I do, let me maybe drop in another poll and just ask, what do sales and marketing organizations look like in a couple of years? And first off, there's no right answer because we don't know 100% what it's going to be. But do you think it's going to be like mostly humans, 50-50, mostly agents? Um, how do we see this actually taking place? And I think it's just really interesting and, you know,
I'll leave that up for a
it
minute. I will give you a little
yeah,
briefing that majority are saying 50-50.
that's cool. Yeah, I mean, it seems like that's where things are going. So, um, all right, let me jump into this next example really quick and wrap up.
I'm sorry.
So,
I apologize. So on something like that, and to put it in context, coming from a sales background, it's the actual interaction or it's the support, so that makes a huge difference. And that's where I'm struggling with right now is the actual outreach, the actual planning, so there are a lot of different factors. You don't have to answer that now, but with a question like that, it's somewhat um,
vague. Yeah,
not loaded, but it, it 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 begs a little bit more context.
yeah, absolutely. And we'll chat with that about that in a second. And yeah, we'll get to that in Q&A. All right. Um, so let me go into this example really quick. This is just going to be screenshots, but I want to show you another example of just how you can implement execution loop with agents. So this is the flow that I've wanted to accomplish for myself, and I was able to do this with my platform, and but this is the flow that I want to accomplish, and I call this the LinkedIn post to personalized outbound, which is that you find a LinkedIn post that has a lot of engagement, um, and you want to take the people that have reacted to that post, connect with them on LinkedIn, and follow up with them in emails. Um, and so you want to build that list, build a sequence uh, that actually build the sequence itself, and then uh, for those people, add them to the sequence automatically and have it be personalized. So this is a motion that I've worked on for the past few weeks with my team, and it's pretty much there, and it's pretty cool. It's not just like accessing sequences that are already built; it actually generates the assets themselves. So this flow starts by just finding a LinkedIn post that's kind of in the similar topic that you're interested in. It could be a post from your team, your company, or someone else that's in a similar space. So you start by finding a LinkedIn post that has some engagement, and then you can just go prompt the agent um, describing your intent to the teammate. So here it's just saying, hey, I'd like to build a list of the people that reacted to this post. You just paste in the link. And then after you say this, after you do that, build a 3-step sequence. First step, connect with them on LinkedIn, follow up with emails, and then personalize based on this profile. Um, and then, add the people to the sequence. So this is really powerful because it's not just taking the people, adding them to a sequence that already exists. It actually builds the sequence around the post that you're referencing. So first thing it does is it will actually just build a list. So it can actually take that post, the people that reacted to it, build the list. It will create the sequence So it creates a sequence starting with connecting on LinkedIn, and then 2 emails with personalization. Then it takes that list of people and adds them to the sequence. And then you can see all the people inside that sequence. They aren't just going through with a merge field sequence. They each get their own personalized flavor based on their profile that we researched. So this is just another example of a really cool execution loop that you could have, and there's still like governance in this system around it, protecting you from like spending too much or accessing tools that it shouldn't have the scope to do. Before we go to Q&A, I just want to touch on some common pitfalls. So first is maybe automating a broken process. So as you're thinking about either execution loops or learning loops, be cautious of automating something or creating a loop around something that doesn't work. So if there's a process within your org that's not working right, that's the opportunity for the human to kind of determine ways of fixing it for an execution loop. You could have, I guess, a learning loop, observe it, but don't execute, a loop around something that isn't working great. The other thing is skipping oversight. So I would be very cautious about creating either an execution or learning loop that's unsupervised or doesn't have some bounds around it. There are these stories where people will just spin up these agents, and they're like, org or company pays for it, and then it charges like $100,000 in like a month. It can be pretty wild. The third pitfall that I'd be worried about is starting too big. I would just start with something small. Find a process that you personally understand really, really well and understand very deeply and are able to communicate to your team. So, what I just say is look for loops in your everyday workflow and just kind of come up with the, process of, okay, how do I communicate this to someone else? You don't even really need to start by thinking about communicating it to AI. Just write an email to yourself describing that process or flow, and then you've probably built 80% of the skill itself. Yeah, that's it. I'd like to close by just saying, like, if you're interested in what we're building, the Tiga Revenue Teammates agent management platform, we're doing a closed beta in mid-July. If you're interested, reach out to me on LinkedIn, send me an email. It's a closed beta, so you're going to have to kind of explore and get to see the cutting edge. But if you're interested, reach out to me. I'd love to add you to the waiting list.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. I know we do have a few questions. The first was, what were the main challenges that you faced in crafting an LLM, an agent-based GTM system that actually performs, and what were the main blockers and setbacks you had?
Okay, I think it's pretty easy to answer this is just actually creating the right skills with the right tooling around them. So what makes it pretty difficult is that if you add too many tools, the agent harness can struggle in picking the correct tool. And this is true whether you're just in Claude or you're using some other platform. They let you configure how many tools you turn on and turn off, and then the skills associated with those tools. Where it gets kind of wild and dangerous is that you'll have one motion that you have down really well, and you turn on some tools, you write some skills, it operates really well. Then you have another motion that's very similar, but you need to write a separate skill for it. The agent harness can struggle between picking which skill to use. And if it just picks the wrong one, it can lead it in a very different place. And this is why I think it's really important to kind of have multiple agents that have a limited scope of even certain skills they have access to. But just to summarize, I'd say building skills, scoping them appropriately, and not having too many skills. That is the hardest part I have found in my experience so far.
Okay, next question is, how did you build the API integration to your CRM?
So um, there's a couple ways that you can do this. Um, so when you integrate something into Claude, what you can do is you can add tools to it. So there are some plugins that you can get. So if you go to the customize section in your Claude Cowork, you can you can look through a marketplace of tools, and HubSpot and Salesforce, they all have tools. But even then, within their tools, sometimes they'll have multiple types of tools. So they'll have a MCP way of communicating with them, but they also have CLI ways of communicating, which are like a little bit lower level. And so if you're doing something kind of like more simple, I would just add like go to the marketplace, select like the HubSpot or Salesforce MCP tool, and you can just plug it in. And then even within there, I believe you can like limit certain skills. Like if you don't want it to access certain things in your HubSpot, you can limit its scope. But I'd go to the marketplace and then just select some skills there.
Okay. We had quite a few questions about LinkedIn. A lot of people are wondering, how do you avoid LinkedIn's prohibitions around scraping data? And do you have concerns about your account being banned? And how can they make Claude do what you showed your LinkedIn doing, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So doing things like building certain types of lists on LinkedIn, you have to get a data vendor for, and they're not using for things like building lists from a post, for example. Um, you don't use your profile to build those lists because most LinkedIn posts are technically all on the public web. And there's rulings that basically say if anything's on the public web, you're allowed to scrape that data. They still obviously don't want you to do that. But there are data vendors that just dedicate themselves to, um, gathering that data for you, and then you can implement them as either MCPs. So I think Rapid might have some. Um, Data Raid has some of these. With a platform like Tiga, we have it as a tool and skill where you just say, "Hey, this is the post I want to scrape some data from." It doesn't use your profile to like scrape the data. Um, it's using different vendors to abstract that information, and they're scraping it from the public web um, to build those lists. But you have to get a data vendor to do it. You can, there are people that have tried using Claude, automating the browser to build these. But if you're doing that, you are actually like taking your LinkedIn profile and you're putting yourself more at risk.
Okay. This one, if this person, if I get the question wrong, feel free to speak up, but they're wondering how you train your emails not to use terms like the opening lines in your LinkedIn example. If it does that make sense to you? And then they followed that with
Hmm.
recognizing your blah blah. I've been following your blah blah.
Oh,
Does that
well,
make sense to
yes, yes.
you? Okay,
It's
perfect.
basically saying like, hey, I'm using AI to personalize an outbound. And I don't want it to sound super generic. I don't want it to sound like it's not me, like I didn't put in the effort to crafting a personalization or outbound to this person. So the way that you're going to overcome that is you're going to need actual examples of what you want to say. Um, so you could take, you know, 10 emails that you've written in an email example. And then in your skill for Claude, you're going to either drop it in a directory of the skill or just, put some new lines at the bottom of your skill and say, these are example outbound emails. And you paste in 10 emails. And then you could say why one was voiced a certain way versus another. As the skill runs, it's going to reference those emails, and it's going to sound, you know, dramatically more unique to the human it's representing or doing work on behalf of. And this is a similar process to like if you had an intern or a teammate that was writing emails for you. Um, if all they had to go off of is just who they're writing to, they could probably write a fairly good generic email. But if you said, all right, here are 10 example emails that I want you to use as a reference, they're going to do a lot better. And it's the same with LinkedIn. So if you're writing messages on LinkedIn, um, you're going to need a lot of examples. And what makes it even more powerful is if you give the reason for why one email sounds a certain way and the other one sounds another. If you just give it one sentence, like, here's an example of this scenario and why I wrote this email this way, the language model will perform way better. And that's the piece that makes it like really powerful and unique to you is you giving it that capability.
Okay, so I think this kind of goes along with what you're talking about, but clarifying that can this agent be taught to send out emails from your account? Like I believe from your actual email account.
Yes, it is possible to do that. So you're going to need an agent harness that enables that capability. And not all of them do. But if you're using Claude Desktop, that harness does have the ability to hook into your personal email. So it's going to be able to send a one-off email from your account. And you'd go into like the marketplace, and if you're using, Google, Gmail, you're going to OAuth and connect it. If you're using Outlook, you connect it. Um, it doesn't have the exact functionality though that something like a Salesloft or an Outreach would. It does have scheduling capability, so you can schedule like a loop for it to work on. Um, but if you have like 100 people you're trying to email and you're like, okay, I want to email these 100 people throughout the day and I want to space it out so that, the my inbox doesn't get flagged or, something. It doesn't really do well with that kind of scenario. It would be good for maybe one-off sending emails, but to do something more like a sequence with rate limiting, you're going to need a more complex tool to integrate with it. But out of the box, you could get it to send emails from your account.
Okay. Um, when would you utilize a platform like N8N?
Uh, so something like N8N is uh, would be a great platform for if you have a process that maybe doesn't have any tooling that hooks into something like Claude. So N8N is really powerful because it can do things like make webhook requests, integrate with tools that are maybe a little bit more niche, or if you want something that is very, very deterministic because it is a more rules-based system relative to an agent. Agents have the language model is the fundamental thing that's determining flow. So I would say if it's a process that's similar to something that you would have in Zapier, um, you could you could use something like N8N, but probably something that would be better is like a platform that we're building, which is Tiga, which is just using the agent to access, both tools with webhooks and with MCP. But N8N is something more that's like a superpowered Zapier.
Okay. I know there's a couple people just suggesting different platforms in the chat, such as IO. There's like Seamless. They've suggested Seamless is an easy tool to secure data. We do have another question saying, are you interested in VAR partners who have deep experience in industry segments like biotech and HubSpot?
Um, yeah, uh, you can use platforms like Seamless and Apollo, but they're predominantly focused around data. That's the main thing that they focus towards. And I think they have certain challenges because I think that as we're moving towards a true like, you know, agentic workforce, we have a poll that went out that says, do we think it's going to be mostly humans or mostly AI or something in between? You know, it's like 50-50. It's going to be heavily, heavily agent workforces in conjunction with your team. And I think that the incumbent kind of older companies are always going to be um, not super optimized for agents. Um, but I think that there are newer platforms that are focusing more on like, okay, agent first, controls, the ability to access all these other systems, and tools like Apollo and Seamless. They are really just like MCPs that hook into your Claude or your agent platform. Um, anyways, but they're definitely good if you're already accustomed to kind of that flow, and you're not really interested in leaning into a super agentic future.
Okay. Does Tiga support email and LinkedIn sequences directly, or do I have to purchase SalesLoft or other tools?
We do that out of the box. So if you use Tiga, you can do LinkedIn automation. So you can automate campaigns in LinkedIn similar to how you'd use something like SalesLoft. So you can automate messaging, connections, stuff like that. And then it's the same with email. You can automate emails, personalize them. You can A/B test things. Yeah. And so you get it out of the box if you use Tiga.
Okay, great. Um, and then I think that was our last question we had in here. If anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat now, but it looks like we're almost out of time anyways. Michael, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add about any of the previous questions, and if not, that's totally fine too. We can end it here. I think we did get one more question, so maybe let's just add on, or let's just end on this one.
Yeah.
Saying, how do you manage, monitor, or audit quality control during a mass outreach event, for example, via email through CRM, in order to minimize mistakes, spelling, personalization of the message, etc.?
Yeah, I think that when you could have a learning loop where you have an agent just monitoring the emails generated within your platform to send emails, and you could have it just like read all of the emails and then generate a report either every day or generate a report once it finds something that's messed up, and it could like send it to the appropriate person or user that owns that sequence. So you'd have to, get an agent platform, uh, integrate um, integrate with whatever's sending your emails, and then have a step that just monitors the tasks that are generated, and then have the ability to like generate a report and send it to them.
Okay, awesome. We did have a question. This one's more for me. Will we send out the recording? And the answer is yes, you guys can have the recording from today. We'll make sure that goes out to everyone. Um, And we'll make sure to include Michael's email address on that as well, so that if you have any follow-up questions for him or would like to meet with him, yeah, his email is also on the screen now, his email and his LinkedIn. So you can reach out to him here, and we'll also make sure to do that email so you have that as well. But with that, we would like to end it, and thank you so much to Michael for the masterclass today. It was very insightful, and I think a lot of people, especially based on the chat, it looked like a lot of people found it very useful. So I think we'll go ahead and end it here. But thank you everyone for joining us today, and we hope to see you at another event soon.